Welcome to Benjamin Recaps, where every movie is given a fresh perspective. Get ready to dive into the twisted world of Hypnotic, a horror film that will leave you mesmerized. I'll take you through all the nail-biting moments and uncover all the secrets that make this movie so compelling. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be hypnotized by Hypnotic, right here on Benjamin Recaps. Jen is a jobless software engineer who recently ended her long-term relationship with Brian and is feeling stuck in life. She goes to see her friend Gina at her housewarming party, where Gina informs her that Brian is present. Inside, the two notice each other and Gina's husband apologizes for not noticing Jen. Gina then introduces Jen to her therapist, Dr. Colin Mead, a handsome man with piercing blue eyes. Jen stops Brian from eating some snacks during dinner because she is certain they contain sesame and Brian is allergic to it. Jen is slightly inebriated after the party when Colin approaches her and leaves his credentials in case she is interested in a session. Brian tells Jen that he thinks about her all the time and misses her as she waits for her Uber. He offers to drive her home, but she rejects the offer. It was discovered in the morning that they had slept together. Jen meets Gina at a coffee shop that night and tells her everything. Jen is simply dissatisfied with her life, and Gina suggests another visit to Dr. Colin. Jen agrees to only attend one session. Colin is relieved when Jen walks into his office and decides to seek therapy. Jen tells Colin about her issues, and Colin tells her that bad habits stem from deeper issues and that there is always a root cause. Jen claims she was content with Brian until she miscarried. She couldn't get her life together after that and ended her engagement to him. Colin suggests hypnosis after some consideration, which is an excellent treatment for people who have experienced trauma. Jen hesitates, but when Colin asks what she wants in life, she simply wants to be happy. He then leans in close and asks if she will let him help her. She starts hypnosis by concentrating on the flickering light. Colin's soothing words assist her in relaxing and visualizing a forest filled with chirping birds. She wakes up with the room lighting up and no recollection of what happened the previous hour. Colin congratulates her on her performance. Jen has a job at a prestigious firm 3 months later. She informs Gina that she pays Colin a visit once a week and that she is doing much better. She has a sex dream about Colin one day, which causes her to wake up confused. She then decides not to attend her hypnotherapy sessions because it has become awkward. Jen meets Colin in a mall. He notices they haven't seen each other in weeks and wonders if she is avoiding him. She brushes it off as being too busy. Then he invites her out for coffee to catch up. They have a pleasant conversation, and Jen tells him about her recent activities. When she notices that Colin doesn't say much about himself, he opens up about his life and speaks fondly of a woman named Amy. He even claims Amy's habits are very similar to hers. Colin suggests Jen invite Brian to her home to talk about everything that happened, claiming that it would make the two of them feel a lot better. In the parking lot, she receives a message from Brian informing her that he will be at her house for dinner. Then she receives a phone call from an unknown number. Something happens to her after she answers it. She snaps out of it at her house, where she is eating at the table, when she hears a noise coming from the bathroom. She notices Brian choking and realizes he must have eaten something containing sesame. She administers his stimulant and summons an ambulance. They go to the hospital, and the doctors say he'll be fine. Gina consoles her, telling her it's not her fault. Jen is concerned because she can't recall anything. Jen decides to return to Colin for another session. She tells him about her inability to remember anything and how she feels responsible for Brian's hospitalization. She claims that what happened to her reminded her of the hypnosis he has been performing on her. Jen has another dream about herself and Colin later that night. When she gets up to get a glass of water, she finds a receipt from her last supermarket visit and notices sesame oil on it. She immediately recalls answering a phone call from an unknown number in the parking lot. "Jennifer, carry the fire," says the man on the phone. She then recalls all of the lost time, including her adding sesame oil to Brian's salad. Jen becomes suspicious of Colin and decides to investigate him further to learn who he is and what the hypnosis is used for. She discovers that another patient, Andrea, has obtained a restraining order against the therapist. Gina is informed, but she does not take it seriously. Jen then informs her that Andrea died 3 days after filing a restraining order against Collins of a heart attack. Gina finally believes Jen after she shows her the receipt for the sesame oil. Soon after, the two women go to see a detective. Detective Wade was in charge of Andrea's case, and they questioned him about her, revealing to him that Jen had gone through a similar experience. Wade, on the other hand, tells them that he got nowhere with Andrea's case because there was no proof. He shows them the elevator surveillance footage. It was all in her head, and it started right after a phone call from an unknown number. Wade suggests that the two women look for a new therapist outside. Gina admits to being hypnotized in order to overcome her spider phobia. Jen calls Colin for an appointment after splitting up with Gina and decides to record their conversation. She asks him to assist her with hypnosis so she can forget about Brian being in the hospital. Colin concurs, but he has a feeling something isn't quite right. Detective Wade, on the other hand, is agitated. He decides to go through all of the hypnosis crime cases at the precinct and notices a resemblance between all of the women who made allegations against Colin. Jen listens to the recording after her session, only to discover that Colin immediately discovered that he was being recorded and that Jen and Gina know the truth about him. It's strange that he ends up calling her "my dear." Jen is distressed and calls Gina, who is in the car with her husband, expecting another urgent call. Jen urges her to return home, but the signal is lost. Gina receives a phone call from Colin and answers it. "Gina, this is how the world ends," he says before hanging up. Gina begins to have hallucinations about a giant spider crawling on her. She requests that Scott remove the spider from her, but it's all in her head. Gina continues to scream at the spider as it approaches her neck. During this time, she fails to pay attention to the road and causes an accident. Wade walks into Colin's office, where he is sipping a drink and listening to music. He informs Colin that Gina and her husband were killed in a car accident, but Colin is taken aback. Wade continues to tell him about the pattern of deaths among his hypnotized patients, and while he is speaking, he steals his spoon to obtain a fingerprint sample. Jen later tells Wade about the recording, and he tells her to stay quiet until he gathers more information. Wade says goodbye and promises to call her in the morning. A knock comes at the door a few moments later. Jen opens the door, thinking Wade has forgotten something, only to find Colin. She attempts to close the door, but he yanks it open with force as she attempts to flee. He yells at her to stop, and she freezes, unable to move. Colin tells her that all he wants to do is talk to her. He tells her that Gina and Brian got in the way of his dreams. He tells her he'll see her soon and signals her to relax, which allows her to move again, and Colin departs. Jen tries to call Wade to warn him, but his phone is dead. While Wade is watching TV, someone crawls out from under his sink. It's one of Colin's patients. Wade is stabbed in the arm and slashed in the stomach. Wade manages to catch her off guard. Jen later pays Wade a visit in the hospital and asks him to find another hypnotherapist who can make her remember her sessions with Colin. Jen meets with Stella, another hypnotherapist, but she is hesitant to trust her after what happened with Colin. She agrees to hypnosis, however, if Stella can obtain any information about her sessions with Colin. Jen has a seizure as the session begins, while seeing a house where Colin is giving her a bracelet. When Stella returns her, she tells Jen that Colin has put a failsafe in place so that no one can access her memory. She suggests that she plan a counter-trigger within herself that will help her resist Colin's control over her. Jen looks for the house address she remembered and comes across some CIA documents containing information on patients who were implanted with false memories. During hypnotherapy, she visits the Sullivan home, which appears desolate. Inside, she notices a photograph of Colin and his late wife Amy, who resembles her. Colin appears unexpectedly behind her. He puts Jen to sleep with some magic words. Meanwhile, Wade's associate calls and informs him about the fingerprints on the spoon he stole from Colin's office earlier. They belong to Julian Sullivan, who has changed his name to Colin Meade. Wade rushes out and orders a unit to Colin's office, assuming he is holding Jen hostage. Jen awakens in Colin's office, where he orders her to sit, which she does. Meanwhile, the police raid Colin's office. Colin explains why she is experiencing this. He then claims that she is a carbon copy of his wife. She even has her scent. Colin leans over and tells her that she can wake up now, just as the cops are about to break down the door. She is not in his office when she wakes up. She is currently staying at the Sullivan residence. When the cops discover the office is empty, Wade makes sense of it all and drives to Sullivan's house. Jen stands there, unable to move. She realizes her dreams were not dreams when she recognizes the room and the music playing in the background. They are Colin's recollections of his wife. He is attempting to implant Amy's memories into Jen, with the goal of eventually replacing her. Colin tells her that he and Jen both suffered the loss of their wives and miscarriages. As he continues to dress her, he places the same bracelet on her that he gave to his wife for their anniversary. Colin is about to kiss her when he hears a door close. Wade has let himself inside the house to save Jen. Colin uses hypnotherapy to force Jen to hold on to the railing. Wade is at a distinct disadvantage as a result of his injuries, and Colin brings the heat. Wade enters the room with a flickering light from a projector and sees an outline of Colin and attempts but fails to shoot him. Jen tries and succeeds in letting go of the railing. Colin uses a crowbar to attack Wade from behind, knocking him down and beating him up. When Jen enters the scene to save Wade, Colin orders her to sleep. Jen collapses to the ground, but while still barely conscious, she crawls for the gun, takes aim, and fires one shot. Wade wakes her up a short time later and informs her that Colin is no longer alive and that she shot him to death. Wade wraps a blanket around her and hugs her, telling her she'll be fine. Jen has a flashback to Stella putting a counter trigger on the phrase "my love of" if Colin ever uses it on her. The counter trigger will cause her to disregard every single trigger that he has implanted in her mind, and she will see the world for what it truly is. Jen soon realizes it's Colin, not Wade, who is hugging her. She grabs a plate and slams it into Colin's head. She then discovers Wade beaten and bleeding. He tells her about a gun on his ankle, and she finally finishes Coleman off. Jen has been in her new job for 1 month. She visits Brian in the hospital every day and consoles him. Jen congratulates Wade on his promotion and thanks him for everything. When she opens it outside, Wade gives her a token of his appreciation. Better Sleep Self-Hypnosis is the name of the CD. She scoffs at the irony. The nightmare is finally over, and we've made it through Hypnotic. This horror film has taken us on a journey through a twisted world that has left us speechless. If you're still feeling the aftershocks of the movie, show your appreciation by hitting that like button and leaving a comment. And don't forget to subscribe to Benjamin Recaps, where every movie is given a fresh perspective. From the latest blockbusters to the hidden gems, we've got you covered.